Shalom friends, welcome to this shiur in Talmud. We're studying Masechet Berachot today. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. My website can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. We're using the Koren Talmud Bavli edition in front of us. Very beautiful edition, original text as you can see, together with translation, notes, diagrams, illustrations, photographs, halakha, biography, and so much more. Please follow along with me as I'm reading. I don't always follow the exact text that you see in front of you, but if you notice that I might have mistranslated something, or perhaps you noticed extra information that I'm not saying, please do follow along and enjoy the shiur and take out of it whatever you're able to get. So we're on Berachot, blessings. We're on Daf Tet Zayin Amud Beis, which is 16, side 2. And in fact, we're at the very end of the page, moving on to Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph in just a moment. We're at a Mishnah which was discussing something to do with the Kriyat Shema. We were discussing aspects of a story of Rabban Gamliel that he accepted upon himself. He washed himself on the evening that his wife died, something very different because that's not the halakha. He also accepted consolation for his servant Tovi who died. They came to visit him and they comforted him on the fact that he'd lost his servant, also something very different to the norm. And then we spoke about this mitzvah of that a katan, whether or not he should recite the Kriyat Shema on the evening that he gets married. Now, as we were discussing this Gemara, the next thing we knew is that the Gemara veered off onto another subject altogether, as is the custom of the Gemara. Let us not forget, in the Gemara that we learn, we speak about things of a halachic nature, law, and we speak about things of an agadic nature, which relates to the folklore, L-O-R-E, not L-A-W, and related to the story side of the Gemara. Let us not in any way think that the story side is anything like a fairy tale, like many people might say, oh, here's a nice little story, but rather everything contains deep secrets. But within the Agadic section that we were learning from last week, we were discussing the aspect of various prayers that many of the rabbis would add to the end of their Shmona Esrei Tefillah. At the end of Shmona Esrei, before, when we say Sim Shalom, Baruch Atah Hashem, Yisrael Bashalom, when we say that and we say Yehu L'Ratzonim Refi, etc., at that point in time, we're entitled to add any type of prayer that we want to God. That is before we then say the second, Yehu L'Ratzon. And we learned last week that many rabbis gave various endings which are very beautiful, both from the perspective of seeing how one can compile one's own prayer and the type of things one should ask for. And I think it also gives us an insight into appreciating the way we should be speaking for ourselves and to other people as well, in the aspect of when we give blessings to other people. This is the type of language that we need to learn to master. Many people say, oh, would you give me a blessing? And the person says, well, I just bless you with good things. Or whatever. But there's so much more to giving a blessing. And if we pay attention to the subtlety of the blessings, the prayers, and the desires that these rabbis are asking for at the end of their prayers, we can also use that as a way of looking at ourselves for the things we need and for offering blessings for what other people might need as well, which they're actually asking God to bless them with. So we learned a number of things that these rabbis had added. And in today's lesson, we're going to see even more of the additions that the rabbis added. And we're starting off with the teaching from Rav Safra. Batatzlotei Amar Haki. After he would daven, he would say the following. Tzlotei, after he prayed, tzlotei, after his prayer, Omar Haki, he said the following. Now, just before we continue, let us take a look at this beautiful edition that we're looking at, which shows us some information about the personalities that we're reading about. Who was Rav Safra? Rav Safra was a third, fourth generation Babylonian Amorah. In the Talmud, Rav Safra is found engaging in halachic discourse with the greatest of the third generation sages, Rabbah, Rav Yosef, and others. He was similarly active in the generation of their students, Abaye and Rava. Apparently, Rav Safra was a merchant who traveled on business to Eretz Yisrael, where he engaged in halachic discourse with various sages. Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Abahu, among others. His primary focus was in the realm of halakha and dealt less in the disciplines of Bible and Agadah. Rav Safra was renowned for his exemplary character, especially for distancing himself from all forms of dishonesty. Since Rav Safra was an itinerant merchant, he never established his own yeshiva and did not spend much time in the study hall. Therefore, there were those among the sages who held that he was unlike other rabbis, that all are required to mourn their passing. Okay, that's just a little bit of extra information. Let us see what he would say. Rav Safra, after he prayed, he would say the following: Yehi ratzon milfanecho Hashem Elokeinu. May it be your will before you, Hashem, our God. Shetasim shalom, that you should place peace. B'famalia shel mala. We go to the next page, 17, Amud Aleph. We're on Perik Sheni, the second chapter of Berachot, in case anybody's wondering. He would say, may it be your will, God, that you place peace with the entourage of above, Ubpamalia shel mata, and the entourage below, referring to the angels. We take a look over here on the notes of angels of whom ministers to a specific nation and whose infighting causes war on earth. We know, for those of us who study more Torah, we realize that there is a spiritual world that is parallel to our physical world. Just like we exist in the physical world with many levels, there is the land, and there is the sky, and there are the seas. And within each of these worlds, within our one world, there are different things happening. In the sky that we might not pay attention to all the time, there are birds flying about. On the earth is where we find ourselves, and therefore things that we see are most common to us on an earthly existence. And then there is another world within the physical world itself, which is the world of the sea. And in the sea, although we don't think about it all the time, there are all sorts of things happening in the sea as well. Well, just as it is that we have a physical world with many things happening in it, and irrespective of whether we know what's happening or not makes no difference, things are still happening to all sorts of creatures, worms in the ground, and eagles in the sky, and all sorts of shellfish and all sorts of crazy types of fish that we couldn't even imagine exist. They exist in the sea, and they are living their lives according to what God wants. Now, so too, there's a parallel spiritual world. And within the spiritual world, there are angels that are attending to all sorts of activities. In fact, the things that are happening in the spiritual world are playing out a role in the physical world. The way that the angels are interacting in the spiritual world causes a reflection in the physical world of certain things that occur here. And therefore, when we see things happening in this world, we should also be aware that things are happening in the spiritual world in the same equivalent strength, in the same happening that we see here physically is actually happening spiritually. Well, what has that got to do with anything we're learning? Because Rav Safra would pray and say, please God, let there be peace in the entourage above and in the entourage below, which means to say the angels above, the angels below, all of activity, wherever it may be, please God, place peace, because that's what we need spiritually and physically. Ubeina Talmidim, now he will continue the prayer. And amongst the pupils, ha'oiskim besorasecha, who occupy themselves in your Torah, bein oiskim lishma, bein oiskim shelo lishma, whether they occupy themselves in the study of Torah for the sake of Torah, which means to say that they have no other desire to study Torah than for the sake of Torah study. They receive no parnasa for it. They receive no honor for it. They receive nothing. Why did the fellow go to the base midrash and study Torah? Because God says it's a mitzvah to study. It's a mitzvah to fulfill our role in life. And he goes to the base midrash. He says, I want nothing more than to fulfill my role in life. Nobody needs to give me honor. Nobody needs to pay me for it. Nothing. No stipend. Nothing. I sit and I study exclusively for the sake of God. That is called studying lishma. On a simple level, of course. Of course, we can go into many different levels of what exactly is lishma. Now, those who study shelo lishma, there are some people that are not yet on this level of lishma. For whatever reason, let us not judge anybody at this point in time. The object of this shiur is to get ourselves to activate and to be aware of different levels of consciousness, be aware of different levels of growth, different levels. Here, our duty is to realize what's important. Afterwards, hopefully, we take the messages with us and we're able to use those messages in reality. If not, we need to read it again and try and work on ourselves further. But at the very least, let us concentrate on it at this point in time. So he said over here that he asks God, let there be also that there should be peace amongst the Talmidim who are studying your Torah, whether they study Lishma or whether they study Shelo Lishma. V'kol ha'oskim Shelo Lishma. And then he says afterwards, like a footnote, just NB, just a little extra addition to the whole story, is that all who occupy themselves and they're not involved in the study of Torah Lishma, which means that they have ulterior motives. For example, they want honor. They would like to be called rabbi, and people should stand up for them. And when they walk through, everybody says, oh, yes, Rabbi, you are so great. You've studied so much. Oh, you're such a wise man. How much did you finished Shas 10 times? Fantastic. You know it off by heart already. Wonderful. Yes, he walks through and he's got a great amount of pride, or anything to that effect, or he should get paid because he's studying Torah. They should pay him very, very high salary, and so on and so forth. Well, Rav Safra said another prayer. Since I'm talking about the subject of studying Torah, of course there should be peace amongst the Talmidim, whoever they are. But at the same time, since I'm on that subject, all those who occupy themselves in the study of Torah Shelo Lishma, Yehi Ratzon Sheyehu Oskim Lishma, may it be your will, God, that they should occupy themselves in the study of Torah for the sake of the Torah. May it be your will that even though we should have peace amongst all of the scholars, no matter how they're studying, that's very important. Nevertheless, it should be your will that all of those who engage in the study of Torah Shelo Lishma, that they should come indeed to study the Torah Lishma. Ultimately, there shouldn't be any reason to study Torah except for the sake of Torah itself. Let us take a look at this note here on the side in the heavenly entourage. Since the reference is to the Torah scholars who study polemically, there is room to emphasize the establishment of peace in the entire universe, in the heavens and on earth, as well as amongst those who study Torah. Rabbi Alexandri. Oh, just one thing here. It says the language. What does this mean? Pamalia. In fact, the word pamalia, as we can see, relates to the English word family. This derives from the Latin familia, meaning extended family, the whole of the household, including the servants or a company, in other words. That is what the word pamalia actually means. From the family, the entourage, everybody above, everybody below. There should be one big family. Everybody should be connecting, and there should be peace amongst us all. What greater prayer could we ask for from God? Then we should be able to live in a state of peace amongst each other, everybody giving to each other in a way that doesn't have to create war and friction, judgments, competition, and all the negative things that we know what happens when all of these things come about and affect us so dearly. Rabbi Alexandri. Now, this is another rabbi. Rabbi Alexandri. Batzar Tzlotei, after he davened, Omar Haki, he said the following: Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will, Hashem, before you, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God, Shetamideinu bekirin ora, that you should stand us up in a light corner, which means to say, what does it mean exactly? Bekirin ora. The word kerin corner has a dual meaning in this context, as it also connotes exaltedness and loftiness. Therefore, the term kerin ora, a lighted corner, connotes ascending in a lighted path, while at the same time, kerin refers to a corner in contrast to a darkened corner. Okay? So we say that you should stand us up, station us in a lightened corner, and don't stand us up in a darkened corner. Let us be in the place of light. And don't let our hearts become downcast. Don't depress us. What does he say? Don't let our hearts become faint. Don't let us become feeling that we're worthless. And don't let our eyes be darkened. In other words, we shouldn't be in a state of physical blindness. And likewise, we shouldn't be in a state of spiritual blindness either. Please don't darken our eyes. We should be able to see both physically and spiritually the things that we're supposed to see. Ikeda Amri, some say, there are those that say, it was actually Rav Hamnuna that would pray this prayer. For Rabbi Alexandri, And Rabbi Alexandri, after he would daven, Omar Haki, he would say the following: Ribon ha'olamim, master of worlds, galoi v'yadua lefanecha, it is revealed and known before you, sherotzonenu la'asot ritzoncha, it is our will to do your will. Yes, God, we want to fulfill your will. And what holds us back? Who's holding us back? So, or shebi'isa, it is the yeast in the dough, v'shibut malchiot, and the enslavement amongst the nations of the world, which means to say the kingdoms, which means to say that it's the yeast in the dough. Well, what is the yeast exactly? The yeast is what makes the dough rise. The yeast, of course, we're referring to is the Yetzer Hara. It is the evil inclination. The evil inclination makes us want to feel puffed up and arrogant. And as a result of that, we feel that we are on our own path. And as a result, we don't get to do what we're supposed to do, which is to serve God. So really, we want to serve God. You know what that feeling is like? For example, you come back from work after a hard day and you say to yourself, well, I feel like really studying some Torah now. Perhaps I have 2 hours spare before I go to sleep still, and I can study some good Torah. And then the Yetzer Hara comes along and says, what? You had a hard day at work. Take a break, rest, relax. You need your energy for tomorrow. It's another hard day of work. The next thing you know, 2 hours pass by. You feel tired. You've rested a little bit, and you've dealt with certain things that you had to deal with, which relaxed you. And now you have to go to sleep, and you lost out on the 2 hours of studying Torah. The will is there, but unfortunately, it doesn't get put into action. Why not? Because the Yetzer Hara, the yeast in the dough, is preventing us from fulfilling God's will. What is the second thing that holds us back from fulfilling God's will? It's an easy one. It's the enslavement to the nations, to the kingdoms, to the nations of the world. This is very easy to understand. We have taxes to pay, fortunes of taxes. Those who live in Israel know well the structure of the tax system, that it takes one left, right, and center in all directions, whether it's VAT that we're talking about, whether it's income tax, whether it's money that people are forced into having to pay, even if you don't have, into various whatever pensions or whatever. You must take that money and you must put it aside, and that's a tax, because you can't use that money for yourself if you really need to. Many people need that money for themselves to live on a day-to-day basis. They must borrow money so that they can put the money into their pension scheme. That's just an example. And then there are things like the taxes that one must pay on one's property. There are things of taxes that one pays towards the building that one lives in. There are additional taxes that one has to pay for monthly dues, whatever it is. There are taxes left, right, and center. And before long, one looks at one's amount of money that one has to live on, and one realizes that 50 to 60, maybe even 70% of one's income gets taken by governmental forces, and you never get to see that money in practice. It never becomes your own. So the person that earns his 10,000 shekel amount salary ends up, practically speaking, with 4,000 shekels, and he really doesn't have the ability to live properly. Now, as a result of that, he is prevented from involving himself in Torah study, because he's so busy trying to earn a living, to pay all these huge amounts to everybody left, right, and center, that he doesn't have the time available to engage in the study of Torah, which is what he wants to do. Now, if he didn't have to pay these huge taxes constantly, land taxes, national, social, insurance taxes, and as I say, money that has to go into pension, which is often beyond the normal amount that a person can afford, money that has to be paid towards building expenses of the building, even if you don't use it, even if nobody ever uses it, money goes in all sorts of directions, and the money that one is left with is used for the basics to provide for one's food. And we're not talking about people who have inherited money or won the lotto or have increased salaries for whatever reason. We're talking about the average person. This is the person who is held back from being able to study Torah. Why? God, it is my will to serve you. It is my will to study Torah. But what holds me back? Shibud Malchiot. I am enslaved by the kingdoms. I am enslaved by the society that causes me to have to work extra to pay them whatever dues they want, so that they can produce weapons, they can do whatever they want with this money that I must pay them as a tax for living in the country that I live in. And then ultimately what happens to me is that all my time is invested to working for this government institution, and as a result, God, I don't have the time to put into studying and putting my mind to serving you. It is the Shibud Malchius that holds me back from serving you as much as I would like to. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will before you. Shetatzilenu miyadam, please God, save us from their hands. V'nashuv la'asos chukei ritzonecha, and we will be able to return to do the laws of your will, the different types of laws, the leivav shalem, with a complete heart. This was his prayer. Now we continue on to the next prayer. Rava. We're speaking about Rava now. Everybody knows the great Rava. Basat Rotei Omar Haki. After Rava would pray, he would say the following. Elokai. Listen to these beautiful words. My God. Perhaps you recognize them from somewhere. Ad shelonotzati, until I had not yet been formed. Eini kadai, I was not worthy. Which means to say, before I was born into creation, whatever we're talking about at this point in time, my soul, my body, whatever existence I'm talking about. But before I came into existence, I wasn't really deserving to come into existence. After all, usually, for example, if a person says that he wants a salary, he wants people to pay him, they say to him, if you want us to pay you, you must show what you're worth. When you show us that you've worked and you show us your worth, that you're worth something, we'll pay you. But if you go up to somebody and you say, listen here, pay me my dues before I do anything, they say, what are you worth? What did you do? Nothing. So Rava would say, before I was born, before I was formed, before I was created, really I wasn't worth anything. And come to think of it, he says, now that I have been formed, it's as if, so to speak, I'm back to square one again. It's as if I've not been formed, which means to say I'm in exactly the same position. I mean, ultimately, have I really fulfilled my task of what you want me to fulfill in this world? Before I was created, I certainly had not fulfilled anything. Therefore, everything that has been granted to me at this moment of creation, of birth, is all pro bono. It's basically free. It's all, everything is on the house. God says, I create you and I give you everything that you have absolutely free of charge. How did you get your eyes and your ears and your arms and your legs and your body with lungs, a set of lungs and kidneys and whatever it is that you got at the time that you were born? How did you get it? Well, God gave it to you. And how did you get your parnasa? Well, God gave that to you also. The point is, everything that we have is the gift from God. Everything is a gift. And therefore, Rava was saying, before I was born, I'll tell you what, everything was a gift. And I'll tell you something else, even after I was formed, everything is still a gift. So to speak, it's as if I was still in that state as if I was not formed. Afarani b'chayai, I am dust in my lifetime, which means I'm worthless. Really, what am I? What makes me so special? Why am I so great? What do I have to my name, to me, as a human being, as a soul, in a body, that makes me any greater than anybody else? All the more so when I die. I mean, ultimately, when I die, what value will there be to me? What will I say that I've achieved? What did I achieve? I studied something. You God gave me the brains to do it. I acquired property, but that was from you, God. Everything was yours. Ultimately, everything in creation is yours. Rava would say, behold, I am before you like a vessel that is filled with embarrassment, uklima, and shame, humiliation. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be the will before you, Hashem Elokai, Hashem my God, shelo echeta od, please may it be your will that I will no longer sin any longer. And that I already did sin, because ultimately that's the worst part of it. Ultimately, with all the things that I've been given, did I live such a clean life that I never hurt any human being in my life? Did I live such a clean life that I never transgressed your mitzvahs? That I managed to study Torah all day and all night, and if I wasn't, I was doing mitzvahs and making people happy and working on myself and growing? No. So therefore, he says, may it be your will that I shouldn't sin any longer. And that I have sinned before you. Marek berachamecha, clean it up in your mercy. Cleanse in your abundant mercy. Harabim, berachamecha harabim. Aval, but lo al yedei yisurim, please God. Though you're going to clean me, don't clean me through afflictions, v'chalaim ra'im, and all sorts of bad sicknesses. Please God, I want to be cleaned. And we know sometimes if you get dirty, the cleaning process is not such a light one. The child jumps into the mud and makes himself filthy dirty. With this dirty mud all over himself, he takes paint and he brushes himself all over his body with these paints. And Abba and Ima come home and they see the child is full with paints all over, thick paints on his body. What did you do to yourself? They say to him, thick mud all over. What did you do to yourself? The child doesn't know what to say. So they take the child, they put him into a warm bath with warm water, begin to scrub, and the child is screaming away. But ultimately, the parent is doing this to clean the child up. He's not wanting to hurt the child in any way, but it is part of the process of cleaning up the child. The idea is the same thing over here. We say that if we might have done certain things we shouldn't have done, God will fix it up. But it could be that a bit of scouring will take place and it might be a little bit painful. So we say to God, hold on a second, please clean us up, but use some treatment or ointment that will do it in a way that there is no pain to us. Please, God, stay away from the pain. V'hayinu comes out, he says, that is to say that this is vidoy de Rav Hamnuna Zuti b'yom Kippurei. This was in fact the confession that Rav Hamnuna Zuti would say on the Day of Atonement. And for those of us who paying attention to these words will recognize them from the davening of Yom Kippur. These are in fact the words that we say in the different parts of the davening. We say, please Hashem, before I was created, I was worthless. And now that I've been created, I'm also worthless. Heal me, clean me, and don't do it in a way that's going to hurt me and come through all sorts of sins and so on and so forth. Okay, now we continue. Mar, Berei de Ravina. Mar, the son of Ravina. Who is Mar, the son of Ravina? Everybody knows that Ravina and Rav Ashi were the two rabbis involved in the compilation of the Gemara. And Mar, the son of Ravina, actually took over the role of his father and put the whole Talmud together as we know it, adding whatever was necessary. He took a great part in this also. Now, Mar, Berei de Ravina, Mar, the son of Ravina, Ki hava misayem tzlotei, when he would finish off his prayer, Omar Haki, he would say the following, Elokai, listen to his words, my God, Nitzor Lishoni Meira, God, G-U-A-R-D, my tongue from bad, V'sifsosai, and my lips, Midaber Mirma, from speaking deceit, V'lim Kalalai Nafshi, and to those who curse my soul, funny words to say, those who curse my soul, does anybody curse me? You bet. We live in a world today that there's always somebody looking at us with a harsh eye, a hard eye. They hate seeing the success that we have achieved. The naysayers, the people who say, you want such and such, you can't have such and such. Shame on you. You want to study Torah all day long? Shame on you. Go and get a job. And they look with an evil eye at the person with all sorts of things all the time. There are people who are the naysayers against us. We have them all. Each one of us has somebody against us for whatever reason who doesn't want us to reach the level of success that we would like to reach in our own lives. Or perhaps they're simply jealous of what it is that we've achieved. And they walk around every single day cursing us. So, Mara, the son of Ravina, says, to those who curse me, Vilim Kalalai, those who curse me, Nafshi, my soul, Tidum, let my soul be silent to those who curse me. In other words, though I know that there are people who are harmful towards me, in their backyards, they curse me, to my face, they curse me, they say bad things against me, sometimes harmful, insulting things against me. How dare you this? How dare you that? Well, to those who speak this way, please God, let my soul be silent. In other words, I'm on such a level of humility that I don't feel the need to answer back to them. What an unbelievable level to achieve. V'nafshi ke'afar lakol tihiyeh, says Mar, the son of Ravina, let my soul be like dust to everybody. What is dust? Dust is the stuff on the ground that people walk on. It's nonsense. Nobody wants the dust. It's irritating. But the dust sits there on the ground and it accepts whatever people do to it. People stamp on it and tread on it, whatever they're doing. So Mar, the son of Ravina, says, let my soul be like dust to everybody. So to speak, I should consider myself in a way as if I'm not really of any importance next to all these other people. Help me to work on myself that I could be on such a level. Well, these are levels beyond levels. The average person can never really get to these levels, but still the prayer is there. Psakli bi besorasecha. Open my heart to your Torah. Perhaps he's hinting that when we can reach the level of being like nothing next to other people, at that point in time, our hearts can be open to the study of Torah, because we're so humble. The words of Torah will be absorbed in a way of osmosis straight into ourselves. Over mitzvosecha tidof nashi. And regarding your mitzvahs, may my soul pursue after them. These beautiful words. V'tatzileni mipegara. Save me from a bad encounter. Miyetzer hara, from the evil inclination. Ume isha ra'a, save me from a bad woman. Obviously, we see that the Gemara at this point in time is clearly directed towards the men who are praying. They're saying, protect me from the bad woman. Obviously, if this was a woman, she might want to say the same thing against a man. Well, what would be different? Well, the point being, of course, to be saved from bad people in general is one thing, but to be saved from a person of the opposite sex who is a bad person and a bad influence in one's life, that's quite another thing, because that can be totally damaging to one's entire reputation. That if one unfortunately stumbles with a person of the opposite sex and this person brings them to a bad situation, well, of course, one's entire reputation of life and everything can be destroyed in a moment, which is not comparable to the bad things that can happen of a man-to-man relationship or a woman-to-woman relationship, but it happens worse when it is the man to the woman to the man. So Mar, the son of Ravina, would say, save me also from a bad woman in whatever way she's going to influence me, or she's going to give me a bad name, a reputation, etc. Save me, because that's really going to destroy me completely. Umikol ra'os, and all bad things, hamisragshos lavo ba'olam, that can come about in the world, all bad things that are liable to happen, that can happen suddenly in the world, save me from all of these bad things. He continues, and all of those people who think badly about me, we go back to square one again. Did anybody ever imagine that somebody thinks bad things about me? Perhaps when you grew up, you always thought that people thought well of you. And perhaps later on in life, when you ask people for favors, or you start asking for approbations of things that you do, and you notice that people are not so obliging to help you out, whatever it may be, all of a sudden you realize that the people that you thought were on your side, you see that they're not on your side. You've grown up amongst people for many, many years. You've achieved all sorts of things, and you turn around to these same people that you've grown up with for many, many years. And you say to them, can you help me out now? Will you give me that assistance that I need to get on further in my life? Just say a kind word about me, something. The person turns around and says, no, I will not do it. And you suddenly realize that there are people that think bad things about one. Meheira hafer atzatzam, says Mar, the son of Ravina. Please, Hashem, quickly nullify their advice, these bad thoughts that they have about us, v'kalkel makshvotam, and destroy their thoughts. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart find favor before you, my rock and my redeemer. Famous words, and those, of course, who know who recognize these words will know that these are, in fact, for the most part, the words that we say also when we finish off our Shmona Esrei. For the most part, these are not the exact words that we say, but the most part, these are the words that we mention at the end of Shmona Esrei. These, in fact, are the words of Mar, the son of Ravina. Very powerful words, and we should take it to heart. And many people read these words at every Shmona Esrei, and unfortunately, they don't really know what they're saying. If you don't know what you're saying, read the English translation, because the words are so powerful. They make us aware of what it is exactly that we're davening for. We're actually davening that God should save us from the evil plottings of other people who think badly about us, who curse us, who have the naysayers in our life, who always tell us it can't be done. You can't do it. You never will be able to do it. The people who are jealous of the things that we've achieved. And on the other hand, we say at the same time, let me be considered like dust toward them. Let me not be affected by their negative thoughts. Let me not even think about the negative thoughts that they have about me. And let me be on a level where I consider myself as dust to them. I will be humble in front of them, even though I know that they want my worst. Let's take a look here. My God, God. G-U-A-R-D, G-U-G-O-D, and G-U-A-R-D. In all prayer liturgies, based on different customs and from different countries of origin, this prayer of Mar, the son of Ravina, with minor variations, appears at the conclusion of the Amidah prayer. We continue. Rav Sheshes, Ki hava yasiv betanita, the story. When Rav Sheshes was sitting in fasting, Batat Mitzaleh, after he finished praying, Omar Haki, he said the following: Ribon ha'olamim, master of worlds, master of the universe. Galoi lefanecha, it is revealed before you. Bisman shebeis hamikdash kayam, at the time that the Beis Hamikdash existed, Adam chote, a person would sin, umakriv korban, and he would bring an offering. Ve'ein makrivim imenu, and they didn't bring from him of this offering, ela chelbo, but of its fats, v'damo, and its blood, umiskapelo, and this atoned for him. We'll bring the fats and the blood to the Beis Hamikdash of this animal, and the fats and the blood of the animal would atone for one. In those days, that is what the done thing was. That is how they behaved in those days. There was a temple, and this is what went on. V'achshav, now he says, Yashavti b'ta'anit, I have sat and fasted. I've been fasting. V'nitzma'et, and it turns out that there's been diminished from me, chelbi, my own fat, v'dami, and my blood. Through my fasting and not having eaten anything, my own fats have been diminished, and my blood is diminished. After all, when I'm not eating, my body must digest and process the fats in my body to keep me alive. If I would fast for a number of days, I would become thinner and thinner, existing off the fats and what the remainder of my body has, until eventually I become so thin I could die, God forbid. But the idea is that at this point in time, I am the korban, I am the offering. Because just as it was that the korban, we had the offering of the fats and the bloods, and that made an atonement, so too I'm diminishing my own fats and my own blood. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be the will before you, sheyehechel bi v'dami, that it will be my fats and my blood, shenitma'et, that has been diminished, ki'ilu hikraftiv lefanecha, as if I have offered it before you, al gabe hamizbeach, upon the altar, v'tirtzeini, and may it find favor in your eyes. So this is the prayer that Rav Sheshes would say when he finished fasting. Another thing that, of course, we learn from all of this is the importance of the value of the words of prayer. Let us not for one moment think lightly of the power of prayer, the words that we utter for good and for the opposite. Our words are powerful. They can indeed have an effect. And so we do this indeed, no matter what a person may need in his life. Do not feel ashamed. Use your mouth to pray to God for whatever it is that you desire. And though there are some people in the world who believe that they are so humble that they should never ask anything of God, because after all, I'm so grateful for God for giving me all of these things. Who am I to ask more of God? This is not the correct attitude. Rather, God wants us to look towards him and to acknowledge that everything that we do have comes from him. Therefore, when I'm lacking something, I turn to God and I say to God, help me with this. Help me that I should have the ability to own X, Y, and Z. Help me to have the ability to study your Torah. Help me that people do not look negatively upon me. Help me that there shouldn't be people cursing me. Help me that I shouldn't curse others. Help me that I shouldn't talk badly about other people. The correct attitude is to constantly talk to God. Those who know, for example, that in the world of Kabbalah, we speak about this idea many times of what's called a yichud, which is known as a unification. And in the world of Kabbalah, unification refers to unifying spiritual forces to bring blessing into the world. Well, there is the higher level of unification, which many people don't even realize what they're doing. And that is called the unification that everybody performs, no matter if they're a Kabbalist or not. And that is called the unification of one's lips, the lips. You see, God created us with two lips, and the lips keep on separating from each other and joining each other. And as we engage in our words of prayer, asking God for the things that we need, thanking God for the things that we have, and so on and so forth, the lips engage in the process of unification all the time. Separation, unification, separation, unification. And as we engage with these words, we unify worlds and we bring down blessing into the world. God, help me that I can own my own home. Help me that I can own a car. Help me that I should be healthy. Help me that I should have a shidduch, that I should have children. Help me that I should be able to help others. Whatever the prayer is on your mind, say the words. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov taught this great concept. One of his greatest concepts that he brought to the world is the importance of the hisbodedus, of the meditation, of praying to God in one's own language, using the words that are closest to our own hearts. And we ask God every day, an hour a day. If you can't afford an hour, do half an hour, 20 minutes, even 10 minutes, where we engage in a prayer that comes from our hearts. And we say to God all the things that we desire. No. We do not have to be so humble that because God gives us, what gives us therefore the right to ask for things? The rabbis on the page that we've just read clearly point out that no matter what the occasion, whether it might be the end of the Shemona Esrei, or whether the occasion might be a fast day, we turn the day into a moment and an opportunity of prayer. And we ask God for whatever it is that we want. We're entitled to. How come? Because God has put us into this world and he has given us desires, and we need to be able to fulfill many of these desires in order to be healthy and to function correctly and ultimately to serve God and fulfill his mitzvot. We need so much in our lives. We should never be afraid to ask God for it. Likewise, we should never be afraid to bless others with those same things and not think to ourselves, well, if God wants him to have it, he'll have it. And if God doesn't want him to have it, he won't have it. That is for God to decide. For what is for us to decide is to always wish the best for the other person. Why? Because God is infinite. He is an infinite God who can give us everything in all of existence. He gives so much to so many people. He can do it for everybody. And that is how we have to see life. And that is what we have to bring into ourselves. And that is what we have to give to others as well. Now we continue. Having cited the statements that various sages would recite after their prayers, the Gemara cites additional passages recited by the sages on different occasions. Yichudim, prayers, tefillah, words of blessing, words of kindness. Look at these beautiful words that we're learning about here. Rabbi Yochanan, another story, speaking about Rabbi Yochanan. Ki hava mesayim sifra d'Iyov, when he would finish studying the book of Job. Look at this. Who thought to say a prayer when he finishes studying something? Yeah, we finished just now. In a few moments, we'll finish studying some Gemara. When we finish our page of Gemara, do we turn our learning into a prayer? Which is exactly what Rabbi Nachman of Breslov spoke about. Turning our learning into prayer. What did we learn about? How to fulfill this mitzvah. God, help me to perform the mitzvah. Now we finished studying a perek of Gemara. Thank you, God, for helping me get through this perek. Help me to internalize it so that I should be able to make it a part of me and to embed it within the life that I live. We need to turn everything, all our learning, into prayers. Rabbi Yochanan, when he finished studying this book of Job, Omar Haki, he would say the following: Sof Adam Lamut. Now, what is the book of Job teaching us? This is the sad story, as everybody knows, of this great wealthy man who had everything. And the Satan came and accused this Job in front of God that since already he had everything, that's why he served God with such pleasure and such joy. And God said, do you really think so? I could show you that even if he didn't have those things, he would still serve me with as much joy. And at this point in time, the Satan said, well, I don't believe that for a second. So God says, well, if so, I put it into your hands. You do what's necessary, and let's do the test and see if Job is indeed going to serve me with the same simcha when he loses everything as when he has everything. And of course, everybody knows the sad story that happened to Job. Because of this incident, he lost his family, he lost his wealth, and all the different things went on. He basically lost his life. He was in pain for so long until eventually at the end of the story, everything works out well. He gets married again. He has children again. He becomes very wealthy. He has very beautiful children, and everything works out nicely. But what's the bottom line of the story of this book of Job? It's coming to teach us the following. Rabbi Yochanan would recognize it. The story of Job is really a story about ourselves. And what is the story about ourselves? Sof Adam Lamut. The end of a person is to die. We wake up in the morning, we think that's it. We're here for infinity. Today I wake up, I go to sleep, I wake up tomorrow. Isn't that normal? Tomorrow I'll wake up again and I'll continue to live. Until when? Until the day we never planned for. That's the day we leave the world. And even if we don't leave this world in, God forbid, some extraordinary circumstances, even if we leave the world simply by going to sleep and not waking up in the morning, this is going to happen to each one of us. And if we were, for example, in a previous Gilgul, we were in a reincarnation before this, then we already know that our life went a certain way. Well, of course, we don't know exactly that this happened, but this is what happens. We were a soul in a body, we lived in the world, we died, and we came back again, and here we are performing future and current and future tikkunim, repairing things as we should, and then we will leave this world again. And then there will be a judgment to see how far did we progress. Did we reach the goal that God wanted from us? And if not, we will return again and we will continue from where we left off and perfect ourselves. But the main thing to realize is life is not something that is infinite. It is something that lasts only for a period of time, and then we will leave. Whether we live the life of Job as a wealthy person, whether we live the life of Job as the suffering person, or whether we live both in our one lifetime makes no difference. At the end of the day, we all need to realize that Sof Adam Lamut, that the end of a person is ultimately death. V'sof behema ishkita. Listen to these words. Rabbi Yochanan would say that the ultimate end of an animal is shchita. It means it's going to be slaughtered because it's going to be eaten. So many animals, of course. Very few animals today have the luxury of living a full life. Most animals, chickens, cows, and then of course the non-kosher animals, even in the non-Jewish world where they're eating all of these animals, is shchita, and not necessarily shchita with a knife, but it's death. They get killed, they get taken for their meat, they get taken for their skin, they get taken for their horns, and all sorts of things. This is what happens to animals. So he said, when he finished reading the story about Job, which was a terrible story, filled with sadness, ultimately we need to know something. The end of a person, he dies. The end of an animal, shchita. V'akol lemita heim umdim. And everything is standing for the sake of death. Everything is ready to die. As he said before, going back to our shiur, what we said at the beginning of the shiur, there are two things that we're all guaranteed about. We can't run away from them no matter how hard we try, no matter how much we don't want it. Taxes and death. Both of them happen against our will and force us against everything that we stand for and want to do, take us out of that normal world of being free to do the things you want to, and say to us, you can't. Either you pay the government or you pay with your own soul. But ultimately, there's taxes and there's death. Ashrei mi shegadal b'Torah. Happy is the person who grew up studying Torah and not wasting his life away with other frivolities. V'amalo b'Torah. And he toiled in the study of Torah. He was engaged in it. Not only that, but a person who engages in the study of Torah in his youth will have the study of Torah for himself when he's older. He won't give up so easily on life. So many people, they live a life and then they retire and then they spend years wondering what to do with themselves. They have to travel, they have to buy things, and they get bored with life and they don't know what to do with themselves. When a person has Torah, he has Torah when he's young, he has Torah when he's old. Ashrei mi shegadal b'Torah. Happy is the person who grows up with Torah all the time. V'amalo b'Torah, and he toils in the Torah. He's studying, he's enjoying it, he's gaining something beautiful from it. It's changing him, it's changing the world. V'oise nachas ruach lo yetzro, and he gives pleasantness, nachas. There's no translation for the word nachas. We can look on the side and see what it says. It says pleasure. Well, that's a nice English word to describe nachas, but those people who know what the word nachas really means knows that pleasure is simply a cop-out for what nachas really is. Nachas is really something so beautiful. Nachas ruach. One gives this real pleasure, liyotzro, for his creator. V'gadal b'shem tov. And happy is the person who grows up with a good name. V'niftar b'shem tov. And he dies with a good name. Fortunate is such a person that as he grows up, people say about his growing up, what a wonderful boy, what a wonderful girl. And when he gets to become a teenager, what a wonderful young man, what a wonderful young lady. And then they get married and they say, what a wonderful couple they were, what wonderful parents they were, what wonderful grandparents they were, and so on and so forth. Look what they gave to the community. And when eventually they die, and it's the eulogy, and people say, well, what a wonderful person this was, or what wonderful people these were, whatever we're talking about in the instance. So he says, V'gadal b'shem tov, v'niftar b'shem tov. He grew up with a good name and he died with a good name. How many of us can really say about ourselves that we grew up with a good name? That even when we were young, people spoke well about us. We were not mischievous children, disrupting the lives of others. And then we became teenagers. We rebelled against so many things. And when we became adults, we did certain things we wish we wouldn't have done. You know, how many people can really say that they grew up with a good name, clear, and that they even died with a good name, clear? Very few people can really say that about themselves. I know that when it gets to the eulogy, we all say good things about a person that's died, but think about ourselves on a private level. How many of us can recognize within ourselves that we really did grow up with a good name, and we did leave the world, when we leave this world, with such a good name that we never hurt anybody, never insulted anybody, never spoke badly about other people, that when we die, people say, what a wonderful person. You know, just to give you an example of that, a famous story is told about Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that when his wife died and he was standing at the burial of his wife, he was speaking about her. He says, you know, it's the custom that before when as a couple, when the one spouse dies, one should for sure ask forgiveness from the spouse, at least at the time of death, for the things that one did to hurt one's spouse in one's life. I mean, the couple were married for 50 years or 60 years or 70 years. I'm not sure how long he was married for, but I'm just saying in general, a couple can be married for 50 years or 60 years, maybe even 70 years if they have such a blessing in their lives. Well, if they're going to get there, surely they fought amongst themselves, all sorts of fights that crop up here and there, and not wanted, but the fight is there. And Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, there at the burial, he says, it is the custom to ask for forgiveness. But I have to say in front of everybody that though that is the custom, I cannot ask forgiveness from my wife, because we never in all our married life ever had a fight. And that is the story that we can really internalize amongst ourselves, and of course for those who are married, to put it to practice as much as they can. For those who are going to be married, to think about that story. What we're here to strive to do is as much as possible to be that person. That is the person who is so good that they can't come up with the fight. They can't come up with the fight in themselves. They can't come up with the fight against others. They can't come up with the fight against their spouse. Nobody. It's a clear It's just a clear, beautiful life that one has. So rare and so special is that person indeed. And that's what we're saying here. Happy, praiseworthy, fortunate is the person who grows up with a good name and who leaves this world with a good name, min ha'olam, from this world. V'alav omar Shlomo, and so about this person, King Solomon said the following, the wisest of all men says the following, Tov, shame, a good name, mishemen tov, than good oil. It is better to have a good name than to have good oil. V'yom hamavis miyom hivaldo, and the day of death is greater than the day of birth. Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, puts a pun. He gives us this double meaning expression where he says, Tov shame, mishemen tov. You can see the word shame, shemen, is the same word. He's hinting to the same concept. What does it mean to have good oil? Good oil means that a person has wealth in the world. He has oil. We know that there are people in the world who own the oil factory of life, and they run the world, and nobody can do anything without them, and therefore they must pay them whatever they ask for it, because the world cannot function without the oil. So we say that a person who has oil has wealth. Shlomo HaMelech says, Tov shame, a good name, is better than shemen tov, than to have good wealth. It's much better to be a fine person than it is to be a wealthy person. Of course, if a person is wealthy, he can still be a fine person. But where is he putting his priority? Is the priority on his wealth, or is the priority on being the decent person? A person can be wealthy and give up his wealth and become an outstanding individual, or he can have his wealth all for himself. And he can have a 250-meter yacht, and he goes on holiday 4 times a year, 6 times a year on his yacht with 2 or 3 people, and this huge yacht with all splendorous things inside he enjoys, and the finest food all for himself he can have if he wants to. This is the shemen tov. Or he can be the person of the shame tov, in tov shame, in which he has a name whereby people say he was wealthy. But do you know how much he gave to other people? How many people he helped on a large scale? On a large scale. He would help couples who got married to be able to set up their homes. He did tremendous things in the world. Wow, he is tov shem, mi shemen tov. He might have the shemen tov, but more, he is tov shem. He has a good name. Let us see if we can just quickly finish this paragraph and at least conclude on that. Margala b'pumei de Rabbi Meir. There was a pearl. Margala, it actually means a pearl. In this it's translated here as a saying. B'pumei de Rabbi Meir, the great Rabbi Meir, would say the following. There was a saying that he would say in his mouth. Gemor b'chol levavcha, complete or study with all of your heart, uv'chol nafshecha, and all of your soul, ladas esdrachai, to know my ways, v'lishkod al dalsei torati, and to be diligent on the doors of my Torah. Netzor torati b'libecha, guard my Torah in your heart. Obviously, this is God talking to us. V'neged einecha tihiyeh yirati, and opposite your eyes shall be my fear. Shmor picha, guard your mouth, mikol chet, of all sin. V'taher v'kadesh atzmecha, and purify and sanctify yourself. Mikol ashma v'avon, for all guilt and sin, from all types of sin. V'ani eheye imcha b'kol makom, and I will be with you in every place. This is what Rabbi Meir used to say, and these are very beautiful words that we can end off on today, that God is talking to us. And what is he saying to us all the time? He's saying, guard your heart and your soul to know my ways. The Torah teaches us the right way of life in everything that it says. Anybody is in doubt what to do, how to say, what to say, it's all there in the Torah if we only listen and follow the directions carefully. To know my ways, says God, and to be diligent by the doors of Torah, to go to the Beis Midrash. And if one doesn't go to the Beis Midrash, you have your Beis Midrash in your home, in your study, even in your bedroom if it need be and there's nowhere else, or your extra room in the home if you have one, or just a private corner where you have a stender, and that becomes the place of the doors of Torah, where we put the book onto the stender and we sit and we study diligently. Guard my Torah in your heart. Torah must be in the heart. If it's not in the heart, it's no good. If it's just on the lips, people just talk Torah all the time. Isn't this what the Torah says? Isn't that what Torah says? But there's nothing there. It's empty. Nothing inside the heart. Waste of time. All the Torah that's being studied, a waste of time. Torah has to penetrate in the heart. If it's not penetrating in the heart, a waste of time. Torah has to go right inside and say, how has it affected me? How has it changed me for the better? Can't escape it. Guard the Torah in your heart. And in front of your eyes, let my fear be. See the name of God. Shivisi Hashem lenedi samid. Place the name of God in front of your eyes always. That's what David HaMelech says to us. I place the name of God in front of me all the time. Shivisi Hashem lenedi samid. When we look with our eyes, what do we see? We see the fear of God. I must be careful in what I'm doing. I realize that I have an effect on all of creation, and I must be careful in what I'm doing. Guard your mouth from all sin. Use your mouth to say good things to people and wish them the best. Look out for their best. Desire the good things that they should have just as much as you desire it for yourself. Purify, sanctify yourself of all sin. There's a problem, lots of problems in life. We do things we shouldn't do. Let's get it out of our systems. Purify, sanctify ourselves as much as we can. Let's at least speak about it now to get it, the start of the process going to penetrate the heart. And then says God to us, I will be with you in every place. We just look here very quickly on the notes here. When he would conclude the study of the book of Job, the connection between this and the book of Job is that the book ends by noting the death of Job. And Job died, being old and full of days. Even though his transgressions were cleansed and he was free of sin, he neither merited nor was he promised eternal corporeal life. The conclusion is that continued enjoyment of life in its physical form is not an objective, since all are destined for death. Rather, the objective is to be one who grew up with a good name. We said over here that Rabbi Meir was one to say, this was his saying that he said, these adages that were stated by these sages on a regular basis served as guidance for the ideal manner in which one should live his life. Even Rav's statement with regard to the world to come underscores certain values, distinguishing between those that are temporal with no impact on the world to come and those which are eternal, toward which one should aspire. What beautiful teachings we've been learning together. We're coming towards the end, but unfortunately we've run out of time. We'll have to conclude this in our next lesson. Let's just remember these beautiful teachings. If you feel you want to go over it again, please listen to the shiur again. Not to listen to me having to give over the words, just paying attention to the words that are being spoken about in this Gemara because they are so powerful. Beautiful words of prayer, beautiful words of blessing, beautiful words of the heart, penetration, meaning, and what life is really all about. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. My site can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur, please show your appreciation and give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it if you would click on the thumbs up button below the YouTube video to say that you've liked this video. Please feel free to make a comment. Feel free to be in touch with me via my website. I would be delighted to be in touch with you about any subject, Torah, life, growth, learning. If you'd like to learn with me one-on-one, let's set up a time and let's do some learning together. There's so much we can do. I also teach Sofrut. You can learn how to write your own mezuzah, and I also teach the laws of family purity to young men and those who might want refresher classes who are getting married and want to be aware of the laws of Nida, the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha. My wife, of course, is involved in the teaching to the ladies, and I teach the men in a very modest manner. So feel free to be in touch, and I'd be happy to talk to you about any subject. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to another shiur in the near future, and I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.